Some people see what the rest of us can't, or won't. They notice contradictions we ignore, they point out truths we don't want to hear, and they often suffer for it. Vision, especially the psychological kind, can be dangerous. Carl Jung, one of the most influential thinkers in modern psychology, deeply understood this risk. He believed that seeing through illusions, especially the ones we create about ourselves, can isolate us, destabilize our identity, and even put us at odds with the world. Jung introduced the concept of the shadow, the hidden, repressed part of the psyche that contains everything we refuse to acknowledge in ourselves. To Jung, the shadow is not just a personal blind spot, it's a threat when projected onto others. The more a person sees through these projections and confronts their shadow, the more they risk alienation, not just from society, but from their former sense of self. This awareness comes at a cost. In this video, we'll explore the psychological and social dangers of seeing what others don't, as Jung described. We'll unpack the shadow, the inner dangers of confronting it, the outward dangers of projection, and how this dynamic plays out on a personal and societal level. We'll also look at what Jung believed was the only way forward. Integration. Seeing clearly is not enough, it's what you do with a vision that determines whether it becomes a burden or a breakthrough. 1. Understanding Jung's shadow. Carl Jung believed that every person carries a shadow, an unconscious side of the psyche made up of traits we deny, suppress, or disown. These traits aren't necessarily evil, but they conflict with the image we try to maintain of ourselves. For instance, someone who sees themselves as kind may repress anger or selfishness, pushing those feelings into the shadow. The more we try to act like only one version of ourselves, the bigger the shadow becomes. The shadow doesn't just stay quietly hidden, it influences our behavior, often without us realizing it. We might react explosively, feel inexplicable shame, or judge others harshly for traits we secretly fear in ourselves. According to Jung, becoming conscious of the shadow requires deep moral effort. It's painful to admit that we're not always who we think we are, or that the traits we hate in others might also live in us. Jung emphasized that ignoring the shadow is dangerous because it leads to a split in the psyche. One part of us tries to maintain the socially acceptable mask, what Jung called the persona, while another part, the shadow, fights for recognition. This internal division creates psychological instability. People who seem to see more than others are often just more familiar with their own shadow, and that makes them feel alien, even to themselves. The insight they gain separates them from the world, and sometimes from their own identity. 2. When insight becomes a burden, psychic danger. Jung warned that those who confront the shadow may suffer deeply. Seeing what others avoid doesn't make life easier. It can make it more chaotic. The confrontation with the unconscious often triggers what Jung called enantiodromia, a reversal where the repressed material erupts violently into consciousness. If someone becomes aware of their shadow but lacks the tools to process it, they may fall into depression, anxiety, or psychosis. Awareness without integration is toxic. For Jung, psychic insight without grounding can become a curse. A person who sees clearly might realize that societal norms are false, relationships are based on projection, and even their past self was built on illusion. This can create a profound existential crisis. Jung once described individuation, the process of becoming whole, as a path of suffering. The burden of consciousness isolates those who walk it. They may be misunderstood, rejected, or labeled as unstable or arrogant. This is why Jung's approach was not about simply seeing the truth, but about integrating it. Insight alone can destabilize the psyche. It's not enough to recognize that you have a shadow. You must find a way to live with it, and that requires strength, humility, and time. Without this work, the one who sees more may end up consumed by what they've uncovered. The risk of madness, Jung believed, always loomed over those who went too deep without support. 3. The risk of inner fragmentation. As the ego struggles to maintain control over what's acceptable, and the shadow pushes back, people often experience internal fragmentation. Jung saw this as one of the core causes of neurosis. The more we reject parts of ourselves, the more divided we become. This isn't just a metaphor. It shows up in symptoms, conflicting desires, self-destructive behavior, panic attacks, and chronic dissatisfaction. The psyche rebels when it's divided. People who perceive more than others are often highly self-aware, but that self-awareness can turn into self-hatred if they're not careful. They might begin to over-identify with their flaws, feeling like imposters or moral failures. Instead of integrating the shadow, they may swing from denial to despair, unable to find balance. Jung called this the danger of inflation, when a person becomes possessed by unconscious content, believing they are either deeply evil or prophetically enlightened. This internal war leads to instability. A fragmented person is easy to manipulate, quick to collapse, and prone to projecting their chaos outward. Jung believed that much of modern psychological suffering comes not from trauma alone, but from the inability to reconcile with our inner contradictions. To see what others don't without being torn apart by it requires inner strength, ongoing reflection, and a commitment to wholeness over perfection. 4. Projection. Seeing in others what we deny in ourselves. Projection is Jung's term for the psychological process where we attribute our own disowned traits onto other people. It's a way for the ego to protect itself. If I can't be angry, I see others as hostile. If I repress ambition, I might accuse others of being power-hungry. Projection externalizes our shadow, creating enemies where there may be none. It's easier to point the finger than to look in the mirror. This becomes dangerous when the projections are believed to be objective truth. We might cut off friends, condemn strangers, or fall into groupthink, all because we're reacting not to others but to aspects of ourselves we refuse to face. As Jung warned, everything that is unconscious in ourselves we discover in our neighbor and treat him accordingly. Insightful individuals who spot these dynamics may become scapegoats themselves. They're punished for seeing clearly. Moreover, projecting our shadow onto others makes it harder to change. As long as we think the problem is out there, we avoid doing the hard inner work. We stay stuck in cycles of blame and resentment. Jung believed that withdrawing projections is the beginning of true personal development, but this requires humility and courage, qualities not everyone wants to cultivate. Those who do often find themselves alone in their insight, watching others remain blind. 5. Collective projection and social scapegoating. Jung didn't just apply projection to individuals. He saw it at work in entire societies. When groups collectively deny aspects of themselves, they often project those traits onto a scapegoat. Racial hatred, xenophobia, and political polarization are fueled by collective shadow projection. The group convinces itself that the other is the problem, not realizing it's a reflection of their own denied impulses. This is why Jung was deeply concerned about mass psychology. He lived through 2 world wars and saw firsthand how nations projected their darkness onto enemies. He famously said, "We are driven into a world war to see what beasts we are." In other words, when a society refuses to face its own shadow, it creates external enemies to destroy what it hates in itself. Seeing this clearly, Jung believed, is crucial, but dangerous. Those who point this out, who see the projection, are often attacked. Whistleblowers, dissidents, and cultural critics frequently become targets because they disrupt the collective illusion. It's not easy to tell a group it's lying to itself. And yet, Jung argued, this is precisely what must happen if we're to avoid repeating the cycles of violence and repression. Collective healing begins when individuals take responsibility for their own shadows. 6. Shadow integration as a safe path. For Jung, the only way to safely handle the insights that come from seeing clearly is through shadow integration. This means acknowledging, accepting, and incorporating the parts of ourselves we usually hide. It's not about indulging every impulse, it's about recognizing their presence and understanding their roots. Integration transforms the shadow from a threat into a source of strength and wisdom. Shadow work involves ongoing inner reflection. Techniques include journaling, therapy, dream analysis, and mindfulness. The goal isn't to eliminate the shadow but to build a conscious relationship with it. As Jung put it, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This is slow, difficult work, but it leads to stability and authenticity. When someone integrates their shadow, they become less reactive, more compassionate, and more resilient. They no longer need to project their pain onto others or punish themselves for having flaws. They become whole. Jung believed that this was the goal of individuation, the lifelong process of becoming the full version of oneself. Those who see clearly and integrate their insight don't become isolated prophets. They become grounded, wise human beings. 7. Implications: personal, interpersonal, societal. On a personal level, shadow integration reduces self-sabotage. We become less afraid of our impulses and more able to make conscious choices. We stop trying to be perfect and start being real. This leads to better mental health, stronger identity, and deeper fulfillment. Life stops being a performance and becomes an honest process of becoming. Interpersonally, we stop projecting, we judge less, empathize more, and take responsibility for our emotions. Relationships become more honest because we're not using others as mirrors for our own denial. Conflict decreases, communication improves, and trust becomes possible. The inner work pays off in real connection. On a societal level, widespread shadow integration could transform culture. Fewer scapegoats, less propaganda, more humility. As Jung warned, the world will not change unless man changes. The danger of seeing what others don't can be avoided if more people commit to seeing what they themselves won't. That kind of vision, mature, compassionate, integrated, is what Jung believed could truly heal the world. Conclusion: seeing what others don't can feel like a gift, but it's also a heavy burden. Carl Jung understood that deep insight into the human psyche, especially the shadow, can destabilize the individual and society alike. Without integration, this insight breeds projection, division, and even madness. But with conscious effort and responsibility, it can lead to profound healing. The danger isn't in seeing the shadow. It's in refusing to do the work that comes after. As Jung teaches, true vision must be matched with moral courage. Only then can we handle the truth of who we are, and see clearly, not to judge others, but to understand ourselves.